Now that we are a quarter of the way through the season, it's time to start giving team grades. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Believers Talk. My name is Joe, and welcome to this Team Grades edition of Believers Talk, where we take a look at the first quarter of the season and we start grading this Buffalo Bills team and see exactly how we think they're doing. Again, before we do that, guys, thank you for joining me on Believers Talk. My name is Joe. If you're new to this channel, guys, please be sure to hit that subscribe button for continual breaking Buffalo Bills news. Also, join me for every single game day as we give you live play and reaction, including this Tuesday if the Buffalo Bills play the Tennessee Titans. So in this episode, we're going to talk a little bit about team grades, right? And we're not going to do player by player just yet. We're going to go unit by unit. So that means we're going to do the offense, we're going to do the defense, and we're going to do special teams. And for each segment, I've been joined by a very special guest, okay? So we wanted to break this down, and we wanted to see how others of Bills Mafia felt about these grades. So we're definitely going to do that. I hope you enjoy it. In this episode, we're going to talk solely about the offense. We're going to do 3 episodes. One on the offense, one on the defense, one on the special teams. Again, very special guests joining me for each. So I hope that you enjoy the offensive edition of this video. And I'm joined by Clayton from the Cold Front Report. Clayton, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Joe. Thanks for having me on, man. I really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for joining me. Always glad to have you guys on. We started doing those collabs with Mario and hashtag, and it's just been a lot of fun. So I wanted to get you on the show. So we wanted to talk about the offense. As you know, normally a football team will break things down into quarters of seasons, right? First 4 games, second 4 games, third 4 games, fourth 4 games. We are done with the first 4 games, and obviously the big thing, we're 4-0. But we're going to talk about this offense and how this offense has been producing and maybe some areas that they can improve on. So we'll go position group by position group. So let's get right into it. Are you ready?
Yeah, man, I'm good to go. This offense has been the most prolific offense that the Bills have had in my lifetime. So it's definitely an exciting talking point.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is definitely the unit that I'm most looking forward, most excited to talk about. Let's say that, because just how good they're doing. So let's start with that quarterback that Wyoming kid that no one really thinks is that good, that is inaccurate and just can't get the job done. Let's talk about him. How has Josh Allen done this year compared to your expectations in the beginning of the season to now?
See, this is a question that I tend to struggle with because I'm on record after the Houston game on the Cold Front Report post-game show saying that Josh Allen's going to have an MVP caliber season in 2020 if they got him an alpha number 1 wide receiver, and the Bills got him a number 1 alpha wide receiver. So, and Josh Allen through the first 4 games of the season is one of the 3-4 players in that conversation, just a quarter of the way through the season, but a quarter of the way through the season is more of an MVP caliber performance than anybody, any analyst, any draft, any scout really thought that he'd be capable of in the NFL. And that speaks volumes to Josh Allen's, no OTAs, no training camp, no preseason games. You had no time to try and get acclimated with your new number 1 alpha wide receiver. Yeah. So it is blatantly obvious to me that these two took it upon themselves. They took the accountability. They took the responsibility to put in the time and work in the offseason when nobody was watching. Really, nobody was watching. No media, no coaches. It's Josh Allen and the guys drawing plays up in the dirt. And it's been an incredible season thus far. But as far as lines of expectations, it's both things can be true. I expected Josh Allen. I may have said that Josh Allen was going to have an MVP caliber season this season, but I didn't expect him to be throwing at a 71% clip through the first month of the season. Yeah. I didn't expect him to be top 3 in passing yards in the first four games of the season. That's incredible to me that Josh Allen just comes out in his 3rd season, and you don't really see that. You really don't see it. You didn't really see it with Wentz. Wentz didn't really blow up in week 1 and blow up in week 2 and blow up in week. He kind of had a linear progression through the season where you saw the middle of the season when he really started getting good, which coincidentally was when he got hurt. That's when that's how Carson Wentz progressed. And then Josh Allen comes into year 3. And man, he goes out there, he lights it up for 300 yards against the Jets. Oh, it's the Jets. 400 yards against the Dolphins. Just like that. People were saying that this guy was never going to throw for 300. People were thinking, are the Bills ever going to have a 3-yard pass? At that point in his progression in this season where he can maintain his efficiency while also not losing his playmaking, gunslinging mentality.
Yeah, I mean, I looked at some stats, and I think it was on Twitter I saw that Josh Allen statistically right now is doing better than Lamar Jackson was through 4 games last season. So you take that for what it is. Obviously, you have Russell Wilson there, you have Aaron Rodgers there, and you don't want to discredit what they've been doing. They're absolutely amazing as well. But yeah, after 4 games, Josh Allen has to be in that MVP conversation. So as a Bills fan, I even haven't, I know you're the young guy of the group, so I won't make fun of you for that, but I haven't even been alive long enough to remember the last time, even Jim Kelly was part of the MVP conversation. Even back then you had some great quarterbacks at that time as well. So it's just been really fun to watch his progression and continue to do that. So, and we could do a 15-20-minute episode on Josh Allen and our excitement about Josh Allen. Let's be honest about that. But I do want to make sure we move on to the other groups that deserve attention. And again, I do want to make sure that we talk about the good, the positive, and the negative, because there are some things, maybe not negative, but we could definitely improve on this team on the offensive side. So I want to talk now about the wide receiver and tight end group. And I feel like this is a good time for me to remind everyone to go over to the Cold Front Report, because they'll have to fact check you. So, because I want to ask you a question. I'm sure that you had a reaction to this when it first happened. When we first traded for Stephon Diggs, you just said that you wanted the Bills to trade for a star wide receiver. What was your reaction?
Oh, it's really, there's really no time to react anymore, because as soon as it happens, it's like, all right, well, we got to get a post up. So
yeah,
I mean, it just so happened to happen at 10 o'clock at night, and people are just like, it was the first day of free agency. It's just like, man, the Bills aren't going to do anything. It's just like, I'm going to bed. And it's just like, I just so happened to be awake, so there was no time to react. And after it happened and it settled in, it was just like, all right, let's see where this goes. There was really, because you talk and look at the kind of player that Stephon Diggs is, and look at the kind of mentality he possesses when he approaches the game of football, and look at the kind of confidence that he oozes on the field through everything that he does. And now when the Bills made that move, I was just like, that's the move they had to make. That's the move they had to make for that side of the football. Similar to the way that that's the same exact thing I said when they signed Josh Norman. That's the move they had to make. Because when you talk about guys that approach the game, such as those of the likes of Stephon Diggs and Josh Norman, that mentality that they approach the game with, every single championship team, not just in football, but in all of sports, they always have that guy that approaches the game with that mentality, with that dog attitude, with that kind of attitude that is just like that has a huge factor. Yeah, and absolutely. There was a short time there where it's just like, oh, process guys, culture guys. And it's just like, we've seen the instability of the Bills for however long. And it's just like, what the hell is this guy talking about? Process, culture, get some damn players. Yeah. And get some damn players they did. It just came towards the end of the building. Yeah. And I mean, hey, that maybe that is the cherry on top that they really need. They don't need a team full of guys that have these attitude issues and whatnot. They just need 2 dudes and 1 on each side of the ball. And I think you saw that it was pretty evident against the Raiders last week, as both players played a huge part in the swing of momentum in that second half of the football game. So I think it's pretty evident just a month into the season, the kind of difference just the attitude of your playmakers can really make on a football team.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, I was actually live streaming the moment it happened about how the Bills hadn't done anything in day 1 of free agency, because I went live at like 9 o'clock, and then right at 9:15, 9:30, we got AJ Klein. We signed Tyler. I'm gonna mess up his last name. The guy from Special
Matakevich.
Yep, Matakevich. Right, and then boom, trade. It was like, oh, Well, the Bills did stuff. we just got stuff done. So
like, now we got content. Now we got content.
Now we got content. So it was just really cool. And then like I wanted to get my reaction, but I also knew like everyone else would want to get on to get their content in there. So I was like, here's my reaction. Go watch everyone else have a good time. So it was a lot of fun. So we talked about Stephon Diggs, and listen, he's not the only wide receiver that's doing really well for this team right now. You talk about Cole Beasley, John Brown, they're still doing their part, but one wide receiver I really want to talk about is that rookie out of the 4th or 5th round that we picked up, Gabe Davis. What are your thoughts on him?
You know, really the situation for Gabe Davis just walking in is probably one of the most ideal in the league. Because think about it. Think about if Zay Jones had entered the league in the current situation that the Bills have Gabe Davis entering the league. Now, obviously, there's different pressures of entering the league as a 2nd-round pick or a 4th round versus a 4th-round pick. But at the same time, I was honestly I remember one of the first times I went on #sports. I was talking to Mario and Paul about the likelihood of drafting a wide receiver as early as the 2nd round. Because think about it, you would have had time with a Laviska Shenault who had concerns with his foot injury. You would have time with a T. Higgins who had concerns with his quickness in and out of breaks during running his routes. So apply that to Gabe Davis, who has virtually no pressure. He's wide receiver 4 in an offense where he's probably the 5th or 6th option. But he's really turned himself into a player. He's turned himself into a playmaker, someone that Josh Allen can rely on when he needs somebody to rely on. And I think he just adds a whole nother facet to this offense. And to be quite honest with you, I was expecting Isaiah Hodgins to be the one to break out in the way that Gabe Davis is. But Isaiah Hodgins, he hasn't really had the opportunity with that injury. And, you know, he's still on injured reserve as a result. But Gabe Davis is definitely taking advantage of the opportunities that he's getting in this offense that keeps running in 4 wide sets. I mean, think about it, Joe. Yeah. A couple years ago, a 4 wide set for the Buffalo Bills wide receivers. Who the hell is that? It's just like it's Isaiah McKenzie, Robert Foster, Zay Jones, and then Jeremy Curley or something. Like think about that. Now the Bills have 4 that are like, yeah, this is okay. And really, Gabe Davis is drafted here to be the ultimate number 2 wide receiver. And ideally, he develops into a number 2 wide receiver opposite Stephon Diggs, because John Brown and Cole Beasley aren't going to be around forever. So you need to have a success plan. And I believe Gabe Davis, that's what their vision is for Gabe Davis.
Yeah, it went from defensive coordinator saying we don't have to worry about a single one of these 4 guys to defensive coordinator saying, who do we cover? Because that's how good these guys are. But now we talk about the wide receivers and how great there are. Something that I've been stressing since the offseason, something that I wish we would have drafted for actually, is the tight end position. I look at that room and, you know, you think about Dawson Knox, who still has time to improve, right? He's still going to be a good tight end in this league. You know, that Tyler Croft, who, even though he had 2 touchdowns just the other week, you worry about the injuries always. You worry about consistency. Lee Smith. I don't need to say anything else. And then the new guy who's actually looking pretty good in Gilliam. What are your impressions of the tight end room?
See, I was one of the people that were on the opposing opinion of yours, that you felt like they needed to draft somebody, they needed to sign somebody. Whereas I was saying, hey, let's see with Dawson Knox. And to be quite honest, the Bills can kind of afford to play that game with Dawson Knox, because, I mean, when we see a lack of production this year from Dawson Knox, are we saying, oh, Dawson Knox simply did not progress and he hit a plateau in his development and he's not the player that they thought he would be by the end of his 2nd season? Or are we saying there's so many mouths to feed, Dawson Knox flew under the radar because you have a Stephon Diggs on one boundary, you have a John Brown on the other, and then you have a Cole Beasley in the slot, and then you have Gabe Davis, who we were just talking about. So are there too many mouths to feed, or is it really Dawson Knox having a lack of production due to a lack of progression in this season? Now, I think the Bills do have an opportunity to get him a little more involved in the offense as the season goes along. That could be a facet of the offense that you don't really show. See, that's the thing about this Bills offense is the personnel, because Dawson Knox, he's not limited as an athlete. He's definitely not limited as an athlete in terms of it. I mean, you could say he's limited in his catching ability, but we have really no reason. Right now, we don't really have any reason to believe that is either fixed or still a problem. So that's still kind of up in the air. So maybe it's a facet of the offense that you don't really open up until middle of the season because you're running all of this vertical stuff. They're running about 65 pass to 35 run. Yeah. So who knows if they have little kinks of their offense that they still haven't even unleashed yet. And I wouldn't be surprised. You're only 4 weeks into the season. So I think Dawson Knox has a whole lot of potential that you can uncrack. And Tyler Croft, he took me by surprise. I thought Tyler Croft was one of, if not the worst acquisition that this regime has made since they came here. He was probably my 1B to Trent Murphy at this point. I mean, if Trent Murphy hadn't had those 7 sacks in the last 14 games or whatever the stat was that I saw pop up, I mean, I backed off that hill a little bit, and I've definitely backed off the one for Tyler Croft as well after two touchdown performance. That was kind of interesting to me. Because you look back at his years in Cincinnati when he was at the pinnacle of his career, which I'm not saying that's some sort of steep mountain and he was some George Kittle or anything. Right. But what I am saying was the best season that he's had in his career, he was primarily utilized as a red zone threat. Mm-hmm. So maybe that's what his job is with the Buffalo Bills, similar to that not similar to that, but sort of like how Lee Smith is the designated 6th offensive lineman that wears an 85. Yeah. And we haven't really seen Lee Smith active very much, and I believe that coincides with us missing Zach Moss and them missing their power back. So I believe once you see Zach Moss get more snaps, you'll see Lee Smith get more snaps right along with him. And Reggie Gilliam, I can envision, I could see him having Charles Clay-esque type potential because you talk about Charles Clay, a player who had a similar profile to Reggie Gilliam, came out of Toledo, he was a day 3 pick. Reggie Gilliam wasn't drafted. So neither of these guys are highly touted out of college, and they just have those physical attributes that you can mold them and develop them into quality NFL tight ends. And I think Reggie Gilliam has the potential upside for that. And hey, I'll take him as a lead blocker over Patrick DeMarco. This guy can run a 4.5. He can run a 4. He runs the fastest 40 among of any of the Bills running backs. And I understand he's then that weird H-back, tight end, fullback, whatever you want. He's a hybrid or whatever you want to call it. He runs a 4.5 40. He runs a faster 40-yard dash than either Devin Singletary or Zach Moss. So he's definitely an athletic specimen that is an option to this Bills offense. And I believe they're kind of just saving Reggie Gilliam. Sure. They're kind of saving those 2 tight end looks with Reggie Gilliam and Dawson Knox and attacking you up double seams. And I'm definitely looking forward to seeing Reggie Gilliam and Dawson Knox get involved in this offense more. But I agree with your disappointment of their lack of overall production through the first 4 games. But you look at the rest of the offense, there really hasn't been any other facet of the offense that hasn't produced, aside from maybe the rushing attack. But we'll get into that in a minute. Yeah. But every other pass catcher, I should say, in the Bills offense has definitely had their fair share of the load. So I believe it's only a matter of time before we see Dawson Knox get his.
Yeah, I would say 2 things to the tight ends that would really maybe not trump my statement, but at the same time help me feel better at night. I look at this offense right now, and I feel like Dawson Knox is definitely more of an offense that he was used to in college. You talk about DK Metcalf and Brown on both sides. He didn't get that many looks, and he was a huge red zone target. Other than that, he didn't get many looks at all. And that's just, like you said, there's so many mouths to feed. You can only do so much. And then my other point that I wanted to make is, like you said, Brian Dable seems to be waiting until everyone forgets about the tight ends, and he's like, "Oh yeah, don't forget we have these guys too, and they can catch balls in the end zone." Just to remember. That's something that we can really take relief in and know that we still have those guys if we need them. But as you brought up, let's talk a little bit about the running backs, because I think we talk about the tight ends potentially being a disappointment. The running backs, you want to see us maybe run the ball a little bit more. We did do some research on Devin Singletary. Obviously, the Zach Moss situation, you can't do anything about that. Injuries will happen. But where is this running back room compared to where you thought it was going to be at the beginning of the season?
Given the brand of offense that they're just running, so this 65 aerial vertical attack that they're running, don't get me wrong, I love watching it. I haven't watched a Bills quarterback light teams up like this ever. So this is a sight that I could get used to. I've always been used to the between the tackles off the edge. Are we going to get 300 total rushing yards? Stupid stuff like that. Now it's modern NFL football. So it's definitely refreshing. But looking at Devin Singletary, because he's really the only one that you can really kind of analyze, because Zach Moss, I believe he only played in 2 games. No, or 1. I believe he only played in the Jets game. Yep. So he's been sidelined for 3 weeks with that turf toe injury. Hopefully he can get back. Depending on what happens with the Titans game, I think he, depending on I think he ends up playing the Kansas City game. I think that's the game you see Zach Moss kind of come back, and there's not much book on him out there, so they can't really prepare for that. But anyways, with Devin Singletary, while you do see the touches being limited, he averages 16 and a half touches per game, so 66 through 4 games, 16 and a half touches per game. He's also had 4.95 yards per touch. Yeah. So Devin Singletary, the lack of production from the Bills running back room is far more due to the usage of the offensive play calling. And I mean, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing by any means. I mean, they're putting up 30 points a game right now, so you can't really say that's an issue as it is right now. But you have to keep this in mind. So 4.95 yards per carry. So obviously it's not a Devin Singletary issue due to the lack of production. The offensive line has been playing out of their minds, in my opinion, in the facet of the run game. And Devin Singletary remains efficient every time he touches the football. That's a first down every 3 touches. Yep. So Devin Singletary, it's not an issue, but I think it's a good thing to be talking about the lack of usage of Devin Singletary right now, because we don't got to use everybody all at once. We don't, these guys get hit. It accumulates. It adds up. It takes a toll on you. You don't have to use everybody all at once, and you don't have to. It's just, I like the idea of saving that running back for the later stages of the season, because when you saw Devin Singletary bringing it on at the later stages of last season, it was like, damn, this guy is impressive. If he didn't have that hamstring injury to start the season, and his engine probably would have been close to empty near when it was time to play Houston in the playoffs. But instead, you saw him making elusive plays. You saw the agile cuts that you would see, that you still see on a weekly basis now, just at a lower usage rate. So I am a huge proponent of saving a young running back for the end of the season, when your games matter the most, when you're trying to make a push for a Super Bowl. So I feel like that's a lot. That has a lot to do with the plan of Devin Singletary, similar to how you see a lower usage of Dawson Knox in the passing game with his targets and whatnot. And you see about 16 and a half touches for Devin Singletary per game. And I feel like that number is a little inflated, considering the fact that Zach Moss has been out since week 1. Yeah. So who knows? Maybe that number would be closer to 13 and a half touches per game, or 12 and a half touches per game. And it'd be more 50-50 between he and Moss. We can't really say for sure. But, I mean, time will tell, and we'll see. But I think the brightest thing you could take away from an overall, you can't really say the Bills running back room has been stellar thus far this season, just because there's just not enough sample size in terms of touches. So I think the one positive thing that you can take away from ultimately what is the most negative thing about the offense is that it's probably going to be one of the best aspects of the offense coming the later half of the season. You'll also have Josh Allen throwing the ball at hopefully almost as efficient as he is now, while also having both of your running backs having hot hands.
Yeah, and let's not forget that in December and January, where we hope to still be playing home games, it's harder to throw the ball. It's good to have the running attack at that point, and so maybe you do want to save a little bit of juice in those guys for when we will need them in the playoff push. And let's not forget, when defenses finally catch up to what the offenses have been doing around the league, right? We talk about the Steelers, the Niners, the Patriots. We have all those games towards the end of the season, all good run defenses last season. Maybe we're just saving a little bit. So I agree with you there. And you did mention with the running backs, obviously, to run the ball well, and for Josh Allen to have time to throw, you need good guys in front of them. So let's finish up here with the position breakdown, talking about the offensive line as a whole. How do you feel like the offensive line is done? Because I think that's been a surprising bright spot for the Bills so far.
I love the Bills' offensive line. You talk about the job that Brandon Beane did. Brandon Beane and this entire front office did to rebuild that offensive line from the dog crap that it was. With, I mean, you can't really say Cordy Glenn. They decided to move on from Cordy Glenn and Richie Incognito. And I mean, Eric Wood was just a subsequent retirement of just all of a sudden. So it really went, I wouldn't say from 100 to 0, but I feel like this offensive line went from 0 to 100 pretty fast, a lot faster than I had anticipated, because, okay, you started off by drafting or signing a Quentin Spain and drafting a Cody Ford, and Deion Dawkins is developing, and you make Mitch Morse the highest paid center in the league. And then this year, you know, you had Ty and Secchi and Cody Ford kind of flip-flopping last year, taking 50% of the snaps at right tackle, and you didn't really know what your answer was at that position. So at right guard, you had John Feliciano, who was also a surprise. And let's not forget that guy is back now. That guy is back. This is the deep. I'm not having this conversation anymore. It's the deepest offensive line in football. Yeah, you're damn right it is. From top to bottom, they might not have the best offensive linemen. They might not have, you know, the best guard, the best tackle, the best center, all on the same line. But they have pretty good offensive linemen all across the board, from left tackle to right tackle. And guess what? They have 3 or 4 dudes behind the 5 dudes that start that can also start. So that's an aspect of it. You know, like a lot of teams out there would kill to be in the position the Bills are in, because there is a huge deficit of starting caliber offensive linemen in the NFL today. And the Bills just so happen to have high quality offensive linemen top to bottom. And I think it really kind of personifies what they did with this offensive line when you look at what they did with Daryl Williams. And some people weren't high on the signing. I wouldn't necessarily say high. They just kind of more so overlooked it. They were just like, oh, they signed Daryl Williams, a veteran offensive tackle. He's had injury history, and he's probably just going to be a depth signing, can play guard tackle. No, Daryl Williams was an all-pro football player. Let's not be too quick to forget Daryl Williams was one of the best tackles in football. And then he had an injury, and then he kind of got square pegged into a round hole when they drafted Greg Little, and they had Taylor Moton over in Carolina, that is. And it was like, well, Daryl, where are we going to put you? 1 week it's left tackle. The next week it's right guard. The next week it's left guard. It's right tackle. And how do you ever get into a groove when you're constantly flip-flopping? I wouldn't even say positions, sides. Because if you ever play an offensive line, you know left side ain't the same from right. I personally, my muscle memory is with the right side. I can do the same stuff 5 months or a couple of years removed from playing as I could when I was in high school, just due to muscle memory. But the other side, I'd look like an unbalanced idiot. I'd look like, is this guy even, does he have any athletic kind of aspect to him at all? It's like, that's the thing. People don't realize how incredibly difficult it is to do that. So to see him not perform at a high level when having to do that, when his mind's constantly spinning and he's not really a focus, or his develop's no longer a focus, or development, that is. And now you sign him in Buffalo for $2.5 million. $2.5 million. And this guy, he looks like his former All-Pro self. Don't get me wrong, he hasn't played any stellar edge rushers just yet. He hasn't played, your TJ Watts, the great pass rushers. He has not played stellar guys like that. They did play Aaron Donald, but Daryl Williams himself has not been put on an island with a stellar pass rusher. But that doesn't mean that I can't say that Daryl Williams has looked like, if not the best, one of the 2 best offensive linemen on the Bills team this year. Sure. And to be quite honest with you, he's probably going to, if he continues to play consistently, if his play doesn't taper off, he's probably going to play himself out of Buffalo's price range, which, I mean, hey, either way, that looks good for the Bills, doesn't it? Yeah. He had a career, and he was in a spot where he's probably going to sign in one contract, and if it doesn't succeed, he's out of the league. Right. He goes to Buffalo. He blocks for Josh Allen. This team's winning football games. They make a playoff run. He's playing at an all-pro level again, and he's going to go sign for millions of dollars and extend his career 4 or 5 seasons. And that players are going to see a situation like that. They're going to see players like a Daryl Williams. And they're going to say, well, why wouldn't I go to Buffalo? And, that offensive line has played out of their mind this season. It's one of the underlying reasons behind why Josh Allen has had an MVP caliber season thus far. And I don't think they get nearly enough credit. And that just goes along the lines of what an offensive lineman is. They won't get nearly enough credit when they're good, but they'll always be the first ones under the bus when they're absolutely awful. So you're really seeing the embodiment of that, of the Bills' offensive line. And they've quietly been one of the best units in the league thus far.
Yeah, I would say, other than, I've had some issues with Brian Winters, but now, like you said, with John Feliciano back, he's going to be a backup, and he's going to be, as a rotational piece to that offensive line, to some depth. I think he's a great addition, and that's what he was originally meant to be when we signed him this offseason. So, but yeah, so we do want to talk about, we talk about each position group, and now we want to kind of bring it all together, talk about the mastermind behind all of it on the offensive side of the ball, and that's Brian Daboll. So talk a little bit about how you feel like Brian Daboll has done. Obviously, last year, we talked about the difference between him being on the field compared to him being in the booth. Well, now he's been in the booth first 4 games of the season. What are your takeaways?
Hey, he likes being in his booth. Brian Daboll, see, you can't ever look at it too fairly, I feel like, because whenever the guy wasn't good, it was always his personnel being bad, when in all reality, his offense with Brady Quinn finished 1 spot lower than his offense with Josh Allen last year. So that's a huge misconception on his resume. And there are tendencies that Brian Daboll had from 2019 that carry over into the season, just because it's the same coach. It's the same system. It's not that it's nine of the 11 players are the same players. So it's really just, it's Brian Daboll has done a good job this year. Don't get me wrong. He has done an incredible job, but I'm not as high on him as everybody else. I'm not in the crowd that thinks he deserves this fancy raise so he can stay comfy in Buffalo. No. If this guy wants to go get a head coaching job, we're going to give the man his opportunity to go be an NFL head coach, because there's only 32 head coaching jobs in the NFL, 32 head coaching jobs in a professional football league across the entire world. There's only one place you're going to do that, and it's in the NFL. And if he gets that opportunity, let's not forget, teams came calling after 2018. The Packers called Brian Daboll after 2018, Josh Allen's rookie year. And I understand he only got 1 call last year from the Cleveland Browns. Who knows how close he was to getting that job? Who knows how far he was from getting that job? He got interviewed for a head coaching job. Teams, just by the way it is in modern NFL, when you see offensive coordinators, or when you see young quarterbacks perform to the standard that Josh Allen is right now, and if he can keep this up, if he can even keep up, I wouldn't say 2/3 of his production, if he can keep up any of this, you're going to see Brian Daboll leave this offseason. I mean, whether the Bills win a Super Bowl or not, I feel like you're going to see Brian Daboll leave this offseason, because when you get that opportunity, you take it. Some of these guys are just meant to be coordinators. You got guys like Mike Pettin and Jim Schwartz out there, 2 former coordinators of the Buffalo Bills. I mean, Jim Schwartz didn't leave here and get a head coaching job. I think we all saw enough from him in Detroit to know that he is not a head coach. I think that's fair to say. And then you saw the same thing with Mike Pettin, who is himself. He is not a head coach either. You've seen the same thing from Leslie Frazier in the past. There are certain guys in the NFL that get head coaching opportunities that quite simply aren't meant to be head coaches in the NFL. And I've been on record saying that Brian Daboll isn't even an NFL offensive coordinator. So, I mean, you could say that I'm a moron looking back on it, and it's just like, am I really though? Because isn't Josh Allen the one out there throwing the football? You could say that it's Brian Daboll calling this play, this magnificent play, this magnificent design, this, that, the third. Okay, well, everybody said it was execution last year as to why Brian Daboll's magnificent offense wasn't working. Well, isn't execution why it is now? Isn't Josh Allen the one executing it? So it's kind of strange to me how Brian Daboll kind of gets grouped into the credit, which he does deserve credit, because he is the offensive coordinator, absolutely. But I think the astounding amount of talent on that field, also with a quarterback who's just playing out of his mind, I think that's where most of the credit falls on, considering there is no kind of historical background of of Brian Daboll's offenses having any kind of success, regardless of the quality of the personnel that's out there on his field.
Yeah, he's never had a top 5 offense or anything like that.
He's never had a top 20 offense.
Right. So
let's calm down on the Brian Daboll stuff. It's been good for 4 games. It's been good for 16 quarters with Brian Daboll. And not 16 teams, not 16 games, 16 quarters with Brian Daboll. So let's calm down. I wouldn't say necessarily on the head coaching job, because he's going to get a head coaching job at the end of the season, but he sure as hell does not deserve a raise. He sure as hell does not deserve any kind of fancy treatment from the Bills. He's not going to be an assistant head coach. It's just, if he's going to leave, he's going to leave. If he's going to stay, he's going to stay. That's pretty much that's just how it's going to go.
Yeah, I've never discouraged any head coach from getting, or any coordinator from going after a head coaching job. Like you said, there's only 32 of them. If you can go get them, I'll never feel bad about, I'll feel bad because I know our team might decline, but I won't feel bad and say like he did something wrong. Like, yeah, there's only 32 of them, and they should definitely go after them. But we'll see how you feel next year after Ken Dorsey's done with 4 weeks to see if you feel the same way.
All right, that's some fun.
Yeah. So, all right. So we talked about the offense, and now the last thing I want before I let you go, give this offense a grade. How would you grade this offense after 4 weeks?
Honestly, going into this season, this offense is definitely not playing to expectation, because no one even thought that this was even considerable. Really, like averaging over 30 points a game.
Yeah.
Damn. That's crazy. Okay, we're getting serious on the offensive side of the ball now, because the team literally flipped its identity on its head.
Yeah.
Because instead of being a Josh Allen big play, a Devin Singletary scrappy run, and we're going to win with low scoring, field position, and kicking field goals and playing solid defense. Now we're lighting teams up. And it's just like, all right, well, if the defense wants to give up 20 points a game, we'll be fine. We'll score 10 more. Like, that's fine. Yeah. And it's crazy, because that doesn't fall in line with any kind of expectation. So I think it's almost unfair if you were to give this offense any lower of a grade than just an A, not an A minus. There's nothing I can say. I'm not going to say this is the best offense in the world,
right?
But it's definitely got the potential with the quarterback that they have. Have Manning back there. Like that's really my thought process, because right now it's an A, but at the end of the season, it can most certainly, or at the end of another 4 weeks, it can most certainly be an A.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I was right there with you. I'm probably at A minus instead of an A, but yeah, I mean, other than, you want to see more production out of your tight ends, and, you hope that you continue to see production out of Singletary, and hopefully Moss gets better. Other than that, you can't complain about this offense at all, especially when you talk about the expectations going into the season. Like, again, like you said, the Bills Mafia, we used to grind it out, yay defense, and yeah, just plug away and hope you get that field goal at the end of the game to win it. But we don't have to worry about that anymore. We're good to go.
Right.
All right.
Yeah, it's a relief. It's a relief joining the modernization of football. It's a relief, because we've been so used to that. Just like, all right, we always have good running backs, top first best rushing team in the league, baby. No, now we're one of the best passing teams in the league, and it's a refreshing sight to see. I love some good old school football, but man, I've watched it my whole life, and I've had enough. So hey, I will never complain about Josh Allen on a 300-yard passing day.
Yeah. Whenever anyone asks me if I like old-fashioned football or new school football, I tell them I like winning. So whatever gets that job done, I'm going.
I like football. Yeah. I like football. If it works and it wins, then it's good with me.
It's good with me. So again, Clayton, I can't thank you enough for joining me for this offensive breakdown edition. If you haven't already checked out Clayton and the Cold Front Report, be sure to do that. All of his stuff is in the description below. But again, I can't thank you enough, and hopefully we can do this again soon.
Oh, absolutely. It's a pleasure, man. I appreciate you having me on. Great time. Absolutely great time. Love talking about the Bills with you. Love having collabing with you on hashtag. And now it was a pleasure to come on your channel. I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. All right. And again, guys, go over to the Cold Front Report, check everything out. We'll talk to you all soon. Until we do, go Bills.